If you're a landscape photographer looking to edit more realistic looking photos, you've found the right video. Hey everybody, my name is Austin James Jackson. I'm a professional landscape photographer based in the very beautiful southern Utah. I'm so excited that you're here. I've personally struggled to create landscape photos that both looked realistic and did justice to the amazing locations that I was photographing for years. Unfortunately, with the thousands of tools available to us as photographers, especially landscape photographers, there's a huge problem today where many photographers struggle to create compelling, realistic looking images, and they tend to overuse tools and over edit their images. I want to help you guys to avoid that particular problem. In this video, I'm going to re-edit an old photo I took in 2019 in the fall in Colorado. The composition and conditions in the image were amazing, but my edit sadly was not. Today, I'm going to start off by talking you through the elements of the original edit that I don't like. These are going to be the areas that I feel like came up short when it comes to looking realistic. Then I'm going to walk you guys through my whole process in Lightroom and my whole workflow to edit the photo to make it look better than the original edit. Finally, I want to note that I am using the most recent version of Lightroom at the time of this recording, which was 13.0 or the October 2023 release. Let's go ahead and jump right over into Lightroom. All right, well, because I think that it's helpful to look back at your work and figure out where you went wrong, I will show you this is the original edited file here. And then on the right, we've got the raw file. So I want to just break down quickly what went wrong with the original edit. So when I edited back in 2019, I've got a little bit more skills, I think a little bit better eye now than I did back then. First and foremost, you can see I did a little bit of a sky adjustment. Essentially the sky, the color was really, really nice just to the left of the frame. So I took an additional frame and then I dropped the sky in there. It is a sky swap, but I mean, it was the same night and it was basically the same location. But still not something I generally do anymore. But you can see it kind of is a little overboard. The colors are a little strong there. Secondly, I think the color balance, the white balance, the temperature in the image is just not good. You can see it's really cool over here. There's really strong blues. We've got some really strong yellows over here, and I think it's like too warm up in here. You can see this is a little bit of a challenging photo because of the sunlight hitting the trees, gives it a little bit more warmth. And then the last thing that I see is I kind of painted a little bit of light here, which I'm not super crazy about anymore. I used to do some more stuff like that. I know there's a lot of landscape photographers out there that do things like that, and a lot of people can really pull it off. I really am not a fan of how it looks. So a lot of issues with the image here. We're going to go ahead and edit this photo in a realistic way. I'm going to show you how to make it a little more realistic. So let me select this photo here. I'm going to go to the develop module here. And now we're going to begin our edit. So first thing that I always like to do is scroll to lens corrections. I like to check both of these boxes here to remove or to enable the profile corrections and remove chromatic aberration. Not much else to that, just check those two boxes. You're almost always going to want to do that. Now I will go up. I think where a lot of people make a mistake is they'll start adjusting this contrast slider too early. I'm not going to mess with this quite yet. The first thing I want to do is bring up the exposure. I don't want to blow out the sky, but I just want to brighten it a little bit so that it looks a little bit better. Right in there, I think is looking pretty good. Now I want to go in, I want to bring up the highlights because it's a little dark in my foreground, and I want to bring up the blacks as well. Now I can bring down the highlights to bring back some of the clouds above me. And I'm actually going to bring the whites up to add a little bit of contrast. Now I can start to drop that exposure back down. We just kind of want to get this to a nice spot where it's workable. I think right there is looking good, but I think the color balance in the image is still off a little bit. And I say that mostly because when you look at the trees here, the trees are far too warm. One thing you can try doing is using this little eyedropper here to set the white balance. If you have something in your image that should be like white or neutral colored, you can click on that and then click on that spot. Now, the tree on where it's catching sunlight, it would not be a neutral color. It's going to be warm, but where it's in the shadow, I know these aspen trees are pretty much whitish gray, so it should be pretty neutral. I can click here and that's going to adjust the temperature of my image. You can see it's done a nice job down here in the foreground, but in the sky, it's a little bit too cool. So I'm actually going to add a little bit of this warmth back, and we're going to adjust this a little bit of a different way. I don't know what it was to start, but I don't really care. I just want to dial this in to where it feels a little bit more realistic. Right there is looking pretty good. This is still too warm in the foreground. I'm going to show you how I adjust that later. This is like the white balance is so crucial to having a good photo edit. You absolutely need to make sure the white balance is looking really good. To do that, I think I'm going to go in, I'm going to use what is called like the masking tools in Lightroom. I'm going to go ahead and use a linear gradient on this one. Essentially what this is going to do is it is a local adjustment. So I'm making an adjustment to just one part of my image as opposed to global. For the linear gradient, I can click and drag anything that's white, the adjustment's being applied to. Anything that's black, it's not being applied to. Anything in between black and white, it is partially being applied to. Now I can expand this a little bit. I'm going to untoggle show overlay. Now I'm going to adjust this. You can see how now I can cool that down. Now, a lot of people at this point in their edit would be thinking, well, I want my trees to be yellow. It's fall time. So they would do something like this, make the trees yellow. That is the biggest mistake you can make, and that will make your photos look unrealistic. You do not want to do that. I'm going to show you a little bit better way to adjust the color of the trees, but for now, go ahead and just cool this temperature down just to make this look a little bit more realistic. You can adjust the tint as well as you see fit. Now, while I'm here, I'm also just going to increase the exposure a little bit, and then I can actually drag this up a little bit just to kind of feather out my adjustment a little bit better. You can see as I drag it up, it starts to get everything in the sky a little blue, which I'm not super crazy about, but it actually doesn't look too bad. It makes it look a little bit more realistic, I think. So I'm actually happy with it right about there. Now, I always like to toggle stuff before, after, before, after. So yes, it is less yellow, which is less ideal in the fall, but it is more realistic looking, and I'm going to show you how to adjust those colors later. So we're going to do some more local adjustments later, but I want to go back in and make some more global adjustments here before I do that. The only reason that I did the local adjustments there when I did is because I want to balance the temperature first before anything else. That's the most important aspect of creating a realistic looking photo, in my opinion, which is why I did that. Now I can continue with my edit. You'll notice I still haven't touched that contrast slider. So what I can do is actually go in and I can add a little bit of vibrance and saturation. Do not overdo this. This is the other way that you make your image look really unrealistic, is by overdoing this. Again, I'm going to be adjusting the colors more a little bit later, so I'm pretty happy with that the way that it is now. If you want to play with a contrast slider now, you can. For me personally, I like to use the tone curve. It's a little bit more advanced. If you don't know how to use the tone curve and you don't want to learn, go ahead and just use the contrast slider. But if you do want to learn how to use the tone curve, I will show you. So you can go in and click on the curve anywhere and drag around. Essentially, the higher up you go, the further right you go, you have your highlights, you have your lights on the kind of top end, darks on the bottom end, and shadows on the left. I'm going to show you how I like to use the curve. This is what I'm doing on pretty much every one of my images. So you can basically just copy this on your image and then dial it in as you see fit. Go ahead and drag this slider right here all the way to the left. That essentially makes the shadows smaller. So what the shadows are adjusting is going to be much smaller. Go ahead and drag this all the way to the right. That makes the highlights smaller and more selected. Now what I want to do is adjust the lights and the darks. I want to bring the darks down. I want to bring the lights up. And now I want to bring the shadows up. And I want to bring the highlights down. Essentially, we're creating an S-curve, but we are protecting the top and bottom. So we are making sure that nothing gets too dark, nothing gets too light. We can toggle before and after, before, after. So the changes are very subtle, as you can see here, but that's what we want. And you can, if you wanted to make the changes a little more noticeable, you could just increase the lights and darks to make it just pull a little bit further. But again, I want to protect those darkest areas, especially by bringing up the shadows there. That's starting to look pretty good. If you need more contrast, go up and adjust the contrast slider, but you do want to be pretty careful not to overdo the contrast slider here. I usually don't use it, and if I do, it's usually 30 points or less. Now we're going to go down. Let's make sure that we have everything that we want set up here. I'm not going to do any color grading. I'm going to close lens corrections, no transform, no early access lens blur. We're going to come back and do the vignette at the end, and I'm not going to mess with calibration. So let's go into the color mixer. Now, if you do not see this in your Lightroom, you may need to update because this is a very, very new tool. It just came to Lightroom like a few weeks ago. If you're watching this video when it just came out, essentially October 2023 update to Lightroom. The color mixer tool is very, very good. I'm going to show you why I like it. First of all, I'm going to grab this. I want the sky, the blue doesn't feel right to me. I think it needs to be like a little bit more purpley almost. So I'm just going to click that. Then I can either drag this around to change the hue, or if you don't want to drag it around, I've found that you can get a little better results by just adjusting these sliders here. I want to go somewhere in there. And before, after, before, after. That looks a little bit more realistic. You can also adjust the luminance if you wanted. And you could adjust the saturation as you see fit. Now, I think that's looking pretty good. Before, after, before, after. Not a big change, but again, I just want to make it look a little more realistic. I'm going to grab this now, and I'm going to make some adjustments to my trees here. Now I want to select a good color, so I wouldn't want to just like come in here and randomly click and be like, oh, oops, you can see right there, I'm selected on a black part. I want to make sure that I intentionally get, first of all, I'm going to probably adjust the green, but first I want to touch the yellow. This right there feels like a good yellow for me. And now I can make a few adjustments. So the one thing you'll notice as I adjust this is it's affecting everything in the whole image. So I want to undo this, and I actually want to undo picking that color. I want to actually use a local adjustment. You can use these same tools in the local adjustment, which I'm going to use because I want to make sure I'm just affecting the trees down here in the foreground. I'm going to go to my local adjustment, create a new mask, and I'm going to do, let's see, what's the best way to do this? I think I want to do, let's just do a brush. Now I can essentially just paint with the brush, and you can uncheck show overlay if you want to be able to paint. You can't tell right now, but I am painting on the image, but I uncheck the show overlay so that I can see my photo. Now you can check show overlay. Make sure you fill in the gaps there. You don't want any of that. Just fill that out just like that. Perfect. Now you can see when I make an adjustment, it's just affecting the trees. You do want to be really careful when you use the brush here. I see a lot of people make mistakes that will cause their image to look unrealistic when they use that brush, because they'll try and do something like this, where they'll like try and brighten something. You don't want to use a brush for something like that. For a color adjustment, it ends up working out fine. But for something like brightening, you want to use one of the other options under masking. Masking is great, but if you don't know how to use it, you can really steer yourself wrong when you're doing it. Now I'm going to scroll down. I'm going to pick a color. Once again, I'm going to select one of these yellows right in there. Looks good. Now let's bring the luminance up. Now you can see we're just affecting the trees, which is good. I want to bring the luminance up because the trees are catching sunlight, where it's yellow is catching sunlight. So I want it to be bright. You can also adjust the hue if you need, but I think the hue is looking pretty good. And you can adjust the saturation as you see fit. Ultimately, I think this mostly just needs a luminance adjustment to it. Now I can go in right here and I can make another selection of the greens, because like I said, I wanted to adjust the green as well. I'm thinking somewhere in here is good. Now I can adjust just like that. You can see, again, this will get people in trouble a lot if you don't do it in moderation, but this is how you would change the color of that green to make it a little more yellow. First and foremost, I think I want to increase the luminance just a touch. I want to increase the saturation a touch, and then I want to increase the range so that we're getting a little bit more selection here. And I think that's looking pretty good. Maybe decrease the range. This will be different on every photo. You just kind of want to play with it a little bit. But I'm liking the way that's looking a little bit more. It's looking a little bit more realistic to me. Maybe I even leave those trees a little bit green just to make it look a little bit more realistic. I don't want to overdo it. I can come in here. I can drop the saturation. I'm not always increasing the saturation. You want to be careful when you do things like this, because again, you will get your image out of hand really quickly. So I'm feeling like that's looking pretty good. You could maybe try adjusting. Yeah, you can see when I adjust the shadows, it ends up looking not super realistic. Maybe just a touch down here, just like that. Now I can toggle before and after. It's too bright. I think after I toggle it, do that before and after a lot. The more times you do that, the better, because you're going to pick up on stuff that you otherwise would not see. I think that's looking pretty good. I want to make some adjustments up here in the sky as well. let's go ahead and create a new mask. And let's do a linear gradient. This time let's drag from the top down like that. Uncheck show overlay. Now I can make some adjustments. Now I do want to add a fair amount of contrast here using an S curve. So I'm going to drag down on the bottom fourth. I'm going to drag up on the top fourth. Then I'm going to do the same thing I did in the tone curve where I bring this up just because I don't want to lose any of my details there in the blacks. And I want to bring this down maybe just a touch. And maybe the blacks I brought up too high. Let's go just like that. Now you can go in here, you can make some adjustments just by sliding some things around. Now you might want to add a little bit of saturation here. You don't want to add too much though. Just a little bit is enough. I think right in there looks good. Before and after, before and after. You could also go in with your point color. Once again, you could grab this orange. You could increase the luminance, make that just a little bit brighter. You don't want to do too much. I'm going to increase the range so it selects more of those clouds. And just like that, you could change the temperature of that if you wanted to make it a little more yellow. You could increase the saturation. There's really a lot of things that you could do here, but I think that's looking pretty good for me. Now we're at the point where there's a lot of things that we could potentially do still to the image. I think one thing I want to do is just go back and reduce the blue saturation. I'm actually going to just do that via the mixer here. I'm going to go to saturation, and I'm just going to drop the blues just a hair, maybe about like that. Now it's looking pretty good. Now this is a good point in time to take a look at the before and after on your image to make sure it's still looking good. This is before, this is after, before, after. Now the image is looking pretty good. I do want to go through and maybe do a few other things. One like surefire way to make sure your image looks unrealistic is to have weird things going on in the sky. Right here, I want you guys to take note. Look at the color of this part of the cloud right here. It's like cyan almost. It's not right. So there's a few different ways to fix this. I'm going to see if I can fix it via the point color. I'm going to go ahead and sample a color, click in there. Yeah, I'm going to decrease the saturation a little bit. And I'm also going to increase the range maybe. No, I'm going to decrease the range actually so it doesn't hit the color in the sky. Something right in there looks good. Yeah, you can see the before and after looking much, much better. I can go in and adjust this original blue as well. I can increase the saturation. I don't want to do too terribly much, but that's looking pretty good to me. Now, last thing you want to do, you always want to clean up your dust spots. Go ahead and click on your Band-Aid, the healing tool here. You have a few options. You can do the content aware remove, the heal, or the clone stamp. Content aware remove has been treating me pretty well lately, so let's go ahead and use this. Always 100% opacity for landscape photography when you're removing stuff like this. I'm gonna do Command plus to zoom in, and now I can go clone these spots out. Now the one thing that I do want to do is click visualize spots and adjust my slider here, and this will hopefully, maybe it won't. Sometimes it helps you see dust spots. In this particular photo, it's not really doing a great job. That's okay. I just want to scroll around, make sure there's nothing in the sky here that's bothering us too much. And you can even look in the foreground. Usually the dust spots won't show up as well on the foreground, which is good. You can also go in and remove any distracting elements. So if you see things like, I don't see a lot on this photo. This right here, a little distracting. I'm just gonna get rid of that. And you might be thinking these are tiny little things I'm adjusting, but ultimately they help my photo. Might get rid of this if it does a good job. Sometimes it won't do a good job. You can just hit undo. That one didn't do a good job. Maybe I need a bigger selection here. Try that one more time. I think that's looking pretty good. Okay. Zoom out. Now, image is looking pretty good. I think I might want to just cool down this foreground just a touch more. I can go back in, I can open up this mask 1, and I can cool it down a little bit more just like that. And then I actually want to warm up the whole image. So I'm kind of counteracting what I just did, but I think that is looking pretty good. Before, after, before, after. Last thing I want to do is just increase the saturation in the clouds. I can do that using the local adjustment again, create a new mask. This time I'm going to select sky. I think it'll do a pretty good job on this image. Yeah, you can see it does a great job there. And then there's a couple different ways I could do this. I could try just dragging the saturation bar. I could also use point color, select that right there. Now, if you decrease the luminance and increase the saturation, that should really help. And you could decrease the range if you want to be a little less selective. I think that's looking pretty good to me. Yeah, I think that looks perfect. Okay, so last thing I want to do is what's called a vignette. That's going to be down here in effects. I want to lower this just a touch, and I want to increase the feather. I like my vignettes to be super feathered so you can hardly tell. And I'm going to drag the midpoint inwards. Maybe make that amount less. Increase the roundness, and then I'm going to protect the highlights. You can slide this up on this image. You can see it's not really doing much, but this will protect the highlights from getting too terribly dark. But I think somewhere right in there is looking pretty good to me. Now, last thing again, I like to do before and an after just to make sure everything looks good. I actually might make this a little more magenta tinted. Maybe just like that, and maybe warm it up just a hair. There we go. I think that's looking pretty good. So you can see how that helped me to create a little more realistic photo. Let me show you the first edit and the edit that we just did. This is the first edit here. You can see once again, a lot of stuff going on where it just doesn't look realistic. The second edit, in my opinion, looks more realistic. Let me know in the comments what you guys think, if you like it or not. But that is my tutorial there on how to make a little bit more realistic edit. Definitely go back and re-edit some of your photos. I think you'll be happy with the results. Hey, thank you so much for checking this video out. I really hope it was helpful for you and that you'll be able to use it to create more realistic looking photos for yourself. I'd recommend bookmarking this video and coming back to it when you're ready to edit one of your own images, and then you can follow along with my workflow as I do things. Now, finally, I would be so very much appreciative if you would give me a like and a subscribe if this video was helpful for you. Your support means so much to me to help me to grow my channel and continue to offer free videos to help landscape photographers worldwide produce better images. Thank you guys all so very much. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.